InsideTheBirds.com. The new Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning, and we got a lot to discuss. Jonathan Gannon, of course, spoke this week. A couple things leading into the OTAs, which will begin next week. And, of course, Andrew is here on this Thursday edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, how are you, my friend?
Hey, man. Doing well. How are you?
All is well. I know that this seemingly is a slower time of the NFL calendar, but some OTAs around the league are picking up. But Jon Gannon spoke this week, said some interesting things that kind of stand out. Let's start with one of the things. He talked about the safety position, Andrew, and he says he's comfortable with the room, coach speak maybe, but are you comfortable with this room? Somebody asked me. I had a question from a listener that asked about Landon Collins or Jaquiski Tartt from San Francisco and wanted to know, hey, are those guys a fit for Philadelphia? And I said, you know what, I'll ask Andrew when he joins us to see if either of those two guys would be upgrades or better fits, or do you like with what they have?
Well, as from a starting standpoint, Mike, to be honest with you, I like what they have in Anthony Harris and Marcus Epps. I think they're good enough, particularly Epps. I'm intrigued to see what he's going to do with more time. You saw what he was able to do last year with more time. He obviously has the trust of the coaching staff, not just Jonathan Gannon, but before him, Jim Schwartz really trusted him too. So you're seeing two different coordinators really trust his ability to sort of convey what he's being asked to do. So I think that speaks volumes. With Anthony Harris, with Landon Collins and Jaquiski Tartt, I see a lot of what you see with Anthony Harris, except I think Harris already has the familiarity with the defense. So Landon Collins split time as a third safety with Bobby McCain and I'm forgetting Cam Curl in Washington. And he's more of a box player at this point, even more so than he was when he was drafted. Doesn't play particularly well in space. Played a little slot, but he's really a hybrid linebacker. I think he's just shy of 220. And then the Tart's 30 years old, doesn't run particularly well. So I don't really know if they're going to move the needle at all as far as what the Eagles really need. Now, as a third safety, I think they need some help there because Kayvon Wallace isn't that guy, in my opinion. I told you before that I think he's a fourth safety on any team's depth chart. So I think that they're going to have to add a safety to the room, but I don't think that that's the road to go as far as veterans go. I think you could find a younger player or maybe a more versatile veteran that really fits in with what they're doing a little bit more than those two guys.
Yeah, Collins is in. I mean, he was a Pro Bowl guy. He was a guy that was like, on the right. But I guess the league kind of changed on him right as he kind of entered the league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you look at another Alabama safety, Mark Barron, as well.
Yeah.
He's another player that really thrived, but it wasn't until he was moved into that hybrid role, another one who wasn't particularly fluid on the back end that they needed to find a role for. And that's sort of what you see with Collins right now.
By the way, the gentleman I didn't say I would ask Andrew. He told me to ask you. All right, just to clear that up. I misspoke there. What did you take from Gannon on how he plans on using the defensive line? Like, how do you think he'll divvy up the playing time? Because Jeff Mosher asked him about, hey, you got 7-8 guys here. So, Andrew, how do you see that defensive line? Is it a rotation? Does he use, because, we keep hearing this, multiple fronts. So how do you envision, after listening to what Gannon said, did he give a clear answer, or is that still up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still up in the air. I don't know how privy the coaches are going to be to, or how apt they're going to be to tipping their hand this early. I think I've always been somebody that goes by what are you seeing the actions and less of what you hear, because you can decipher it any way that you want to. I want to see how the rotation shakes out on the field. And to be honest with you, they've restocked that position.
We lost Andrew DiCecco here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. He just kind of dropped out. He might have hit a dead spot some out there. We'll get him back on here in a second. There he is. All right. We lost you there. Now we got you right back.
Okay, yeah. So like I was saying, they restocked the position and invested in it heavily, which suggests that they're going to really put a lot of precedent on getting a rotation in there, keeping guys fresh to get after the quarterback and protect the back end, which I think now is a lot more apt to handle more responsibility now with Bradbury in the mix as well. And I do think that Marcus Epps is going to take a leap forward this season with an increased role. So I think that you look at what the signings indicate and what they did in the draft with Jordan Davis and adding Hassan Reddick and getting a lot of these type of Sam linebackers with pass rush specialization. So I think you're going to see a lot more pressure this year, but also a lot of guys shuffling in and out to maximize their skill sets.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. With that, Gannon said he claims anyway, no changes in how he's going to call the defense with new personnel. Are you buying into that, or do you think that he has new things he can do with the new toys that he has to play with?
Yeah, I'm not buying what he said, because what he did last year wasn't working. And I think in many ways his hands were tied in what he was able to do because of the limitations with the personnel. I don't think that he ever wanted to be as passive as he was or have this novice blueprint or a vanilla game plan every week just for preservation. I think that he really wanted to do a lot more and have a lot more liberties in which he was able to deploy his guys, but he wasn't able to. Now, you look at he's every single area has been improved by wide margins, and I think now you're going to see him be a little bit more aggressive as far as blitzing and sending pressure, and he's going to be able to have a little bit more confidence on his back end instead of having to protect them like he had to do with a Steve Nelson who didn't run really well. He didn't see him give up a lot of plays, but that's because Gannon had to do a lot to disguise it and mask his deficiencies. So I think that you're going to see a lot more creativity in how he's able to deploy his personnel.
Yeah. The other thing that kind of stood out, he talked about, Jordan Davis being this violent, player, and but he saw him as a pass rusher, somebody that can cut his ears and get after the passer. Is that a skill set? I know a lot of people said no, but is it fair? I mean, we didn't get a chance to see him as much in that role at Georgia. They didn't play him as much as maybe we would have liked. So is it in there? Does he have it in him to be a guy who can rush the passer as Jon Gannon envisions, it sounds like?
Well, you don't draft a defensive tackle where the Eagles did without you don't draft a one-dimensional player where the Eagles did. I mean, they obviously envisioned him being a multifaceted defensive lineman, and I do think that the potential is there. I just think he really wasn't asked to do it, and I think you get him into an NFL system, he's going to get his conditioning a little bit better. They're going to be able to work on some of his pass rush techniques, and he's going to have a lot of players around him that are going to work with him, and a lot of mentors, and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, which really specialize in that area. So I think you're going to see a lot more of a well-rounded game from Jordan Davis. Now, do I think that's going to happen right away? No, I think it's going to be something that's going to need to take time, but I think he does have it in him, and I think now that he's with in an NFL system, you're going to see that sort of evoked.
Yeah, I'm interested. The Davis thing is fascinating to me. The guy is so big, and the speed that he displayed for that size, you wonder, we see this a lot in like the NBA, where a guy, he's a better player in the NBA because the game's different. Is this guy gets unleashed in the NFL if he's actually a better NFL player and a different NFL player than he was a college player, just based on his skill set and his abilities? Like, is that going to bring out this guy that we didn't really see in college because of the way the game was played?
Yeah, I think so. And you look at his raw intangibles and his athletic profile and some of the things he's able to do. Guys that are his size shouldn't be able to do that. They shouldn't be able to move laterally like that. They shouldn't be that explosive. So I think that now you see what he brings from a skill set standpoint. Now you're bringing that into a pro locker room with a pro coaching staff around him and a lot of veteran players that have seen it all and sort of can work with him off to the side and help him really transition to the pro level a lot quicker than some might. I think you're going to see an immensely talented player that's going to be more multifaceted than what many have seen in college. So I'm really interested to see how quickly he picks things up and is willing and is able to adapt to the pro level.
All right, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4. Let's flip over to some offense here. I want to get your thoughts as OTAs are going to be starting here, and I guess this will be the beginning of the competition in some regards. We'll see who shows up, but who do you envision as that number 3 receiver behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith? Who gets the next group of snaps of that next group of guys?
Yeah, to me, it's pretty easy. I'm going to go with Quez Watkins, and I think that he's earned that role based on what he showed last season. Now, if I'm the Eagles, I wouldn't have felt comfortable going into the season with him as a number 2. But I think when you look at what he was able to do I think he had 600 yards, and he really impressed me from a contested catch standpoint. He was the only Eagles wide receiver that really fought for the ball in traffic or came down with those 50-50 balls. Not every time, but I can think of off the top of my head the Tampa Bay game down the field. He's made some plays that you wouldn't think a player of his size, I believe he's 6'1", 194, would be able to make. Very fast guy, and he really talked about how he really took to playing the slot last season, which really wasn't what he was asked to do. Up to that point in his career, he was mostly an outside guy. All he had to worry about defeating one guy on the outside and was able to win mostly with the speed. And the inside is a lot more complicated. You have a lot more room to operate, but you also have a lot of different defenders that you have to work through. And I think he really learned how to get a feel for spacing and things like that. And he really took that role and ran with it. So I think that you have a really good blend of your top 3 receivers there. Really interested to see what Quez Watkins is able to do with probably more opportunities, because you have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith. So he's going to be able to run down the field and be that vertical slot, in my opinion. That's at least what it looks like to me.
Now, do you envision any role? Are you still hoping that, hey, more talent, less on the plate of Rager, or are you out on him? Is he done in your eyes?
I think Jalen Rager is a player that it probably isn't. I think it's safe to say at this point that it might not work out for him in Philadelphia. Now, that's not to say that he won't be able to go on somewhere else and have, turn the page and have a fresh slate and go on to have a decent career. But there's a lot of things that go into being a good pro player, and not all of it has to do with skill set. Some of it has to do with you're be able to limit your distractions and stay focused, and the body language. And when things don't go your way, how are you going to react? And a lot of those things come with maturity, and that's not something that I necessarily saw with Rager when the ball wasn't coming his way. Sometimes the body language wasn't great, and I think both he and the Eagles might be better suited just kind of parting ways and starting fresh and creating opportunities for other players.
Okay. This one I'm interested in, Goddard. I feel like Goddard might have a huge year this year. It seemed like him and Hurts, have a little bit of a rapport. But how big of a role can he have with Brown and Smith? But does Goddard have a bigger role than Ertz used to have?
Yes, I think he does. And the reason why I say that is he's that big contested catch guy, going to be a really viable red zone option and a security blanket for Hurts, who I think that, you can have confidence if you're Jalen Hurts in throwing the ball in his direction, knowing that, you have a lot more room for error with somebody of his size and skill set and physicality at the catch point and also in the red zone. But now I think that his role, do I think it's going to be elevated? Of course, but now you have so many more options. I think last season you only had him and Devontae Smith, but now you're able to sort of spread the wealth a little bit. So I think he's going to have an even better season this year, which is also going to be good for him because when you have to force feed him targets and things like that, the way that he plays the game, that physical nature in which he plays the game, doesn't always lend itself to being available for a full slate of games. And I think now you're able to sort of, like I said, spread the wealth and get other guys involved. So I think it's going to be a really explosive aerial attack if Jalen Hurts is ready to take that next step.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they utilize Goddard with the other two guys. And, hey, how are you going to – who gets the bracketing, the doubling? And then you went and talked about Watkins. He could be the guy that really has a bust-out type of year. How about the run game? Somebody texted in yesterday and kind of brought up an interesting point. Like, everybody just assumes because of Brown that they're going to throw the ball more. But this text message from a listener suggested – he doesn't see the game plan changing all that much, just that there will be more opportunities in the pass game when you have to lean on it, that they can still utilize the run game. So will the run game be as big as last year?
Oh, I agree with that person that said that because the running back stable hasn't changed, right? There's just going to be more optionality when they choose to go to the air. They haven't really... It doesn't seem like they've endeared themselves to, like Miles Sanders has endeared himself to this coaching staff. And Boston Scott's still there. Kenny Gainwell, I think, is going to have a bigger role this season. But, I mean, there's not a whole lot. I mean, I still think they need to add a bigger-bodied running back that they can rely on in goal line situations and short yardage situations to convert those. But I don't really see there being much of a change this year. But I think that they just they haven't done anything to change the room, so they're obviously just, they're okay with what they had. But I don't see it kind of going, suddenly going the other direction.
This is we had this conversation yesterday, about this roster, and everybody seems to be excited. I mean, the people's power rankings are top 10. They're going to win the division. Too much, too fast. Who knows? But the Eagles, it was suggested yesterday. We were talking. Do they have a Super Bowl roster, but not a Super Bowl quarterback? In other words, are they the Denver Broncos of this year? That everybody said Denver's loaded. The quarterback position. Do you view this team in that mold? That they have a Super Bowl level of talent, but I'm not sure that the quarterback can get them there. Or is that too much?
Well, there's certainly a reason for optimism, but I always caution folks about sort of going with that Super Bowl, putting that Super Bowl stamp on a roster in May. And you have to see how these pieces all come together, how quickly they come together, because there's so many different moving parts right now on this roster. Yes, on paper, they look like they could be up there with some of the upper echelon teams in football. But as we all know, there's so many things that go into it, health, and how quickly guys can adapt, and how they fit in Jonathan Gannon's scheme, particularly on the defensive side, in which they've made a lot of upgrades. Jalen Hurts needs to get on the same page with A.J. Brown and some of his weapons. And I do think that Jalen Hurts is someone going – you mentioned the Denver Broncos, which is an interesting point. I think he's someone that is going to be good enough to carry the offense, to hold up his end and keep the offense moving along. However, it's going to be up to him whether or not he's able to kind of kick it up a notch, because right now I see him as someone that can really take the offense, lead him into the playoffs. But I feel like eventually when you have to outduel another quarterback, because this is the passing league, I think that might be where he ultimately falls short. But he is putting the work in this offseason, and that's never going to be the question with him. Now, he's got the weapons and everything like that. Now, is he ready to be the guy? And this year is going to prove that.
Andrew DiCecco, Football 4, and, of course, the NFL offseason moving quickly as we are getting closer to August 12th, which is the Eagles' preseason opener. Only 3 games this year. We're getting there. It's Memorial Day weekend. Before you know it, it'll be football season. Andrew, always appreciate it, pal.
You got it, man. Talk soon.
Yeah, he'll be back with us next week here on the Sports Bash. You can check out the Inside the Birds podcast, which dropped today, a new edition